Hi, everyone. Well, thanks a lot for being here again. Hopefully you have seen, at least some of you guys, the videos that we uploaded earlier today, which was about comics in the city. So if you have seen it, we've tried in this video to show a little bit of what is for us an essential part of Lyon Comics Festival. As I was saying in the video, it's you may know that we have a lot of comics festival in France, something like 400 a year. And so when we started 15 years ago, one of the main questions really was about how to distinguish ourselves and try to formulate some artistic direction that would be specific, at least. And as you've seen, we decided to do that on 4 different levels. One being that we thought it would be a good idea to actually mix artistic disciplines around the comic art. And we had a lot of shows, for example, that we presented in the opera, in theaters in Lyon, things like that, that allowed us to have like comic artists on stage drawing along with musicians, with comedians, and to maybe invent new formats and new possibilities for the public to actually see what comic art is really about. The other thing was to, because we have, Lyon is one of the main cities of France, and so that gave us an opportunity, because the landscape of comics festival in France, until we developed our festival, was that the main and the biggest festivals in France are in cities smaller than Lyon. For example, Angoulême, obviously, it's the biggest festival in Europe, but Angoulême is a very small city. And same goes with Amiens, with Saint-Malo, with the Quai des Bulles Festival. And so we have a big infrastructure of cultural institutions. And so we kind of noticed it was an opportunity for us to use them, especially at a time when, as you have seen on many of the videos and many of the discussions we had since the beginning of the week, comic art is kind of becoming more and more accepted, if not noble, in institutional circles and areas. And so we decided that we would try, and we've been doing that for the past 15 years, to enter as much as possible these institutions. And so far we have worked with, I would say, the majority of the big museums, theaters, scenes that the city of Lyon has. And so it was a little bit about showing you what we've tried to do, because I know it's not obvious maybe in all countries to see the comic art going into such places as I was mentioning before. So that's what we were trying to show. And the other, the third part of our will to distinguish ourselves and our festival was to invest a lot in the international part of it. And so as you've seen with Belinda, who was describing this part on the video, we've been working since 2011 on this international part of our festival. And what we tried to do was to, when we started, it was with Quebec in 2011. And we tried to contact artists there. And we basically told them, we'd like to do stuff with you, but we don't exactly know what, but let's try and talk and we'll certainly find out. And because most of the comics people are project people, we kind of made it work. And so we had an important thing was that we decided to work with one region for 2 years, because we wanted to avoid the one-shot scheme and syndrome maybe that often goes with this kind of collaborations, which is, well, we'll invite a few artists from Quebec, then maybe they'll invite some of our artists, and then it stops. And trying to work from the very beginning on a 2 years initiative allows everyone to have many occasions of doing things, and we have time between 2 editions of our festival, and same goes with the partners that we find in other countries. So I think Belinda said a lot about what we've been doing over the years with many different countries. We've been working with Quebec, with Spain, with Argentina, with China, with Germany. Now we're working a lot with the UK. Hey, Richard. And all this, it's very interesting because the more you do international projects, and the more you do international projects, because you tend to enter a network of comics people around. And now we've met Lina from Lebanon, who's here as well. And we are working currently on a comics festival that we want to produce in Beirut, in Lebanon, along with the French Institute, the American University in Beirut, where Lina is working, and a lot of the Lebanese comic connections. And so this is a very interesting thing. And I'm not going to repeat what was in the video, but I just wanted to say that this is something that we were really eager to meet you in Lyon, because every time we meet people, comics people around the world, it generally ends with ideas, projects, and will to collaborate, and that's what we do. So even if you're not here now, this focus, this digital focus, gave us the opportunity to get in touch, and hopefully you'll get here in Lyon next year. And meanwhile, Belinda and I are more than open to discuss any will to collaborate, to exchange on the different things we do, you do. And I'm sure this will lay a ground for productive meetings in 21 when you get to Lyon, finally. So maybe I could let Sylvain say a word about his own video about the editorial landscape. And after that, we could just chat, and maybe if you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to answer and elaborate.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Yes. Thank you, Mathieu. No, I thought we could maybe say a few words about not the video, because it was a few days ago already, but more about the brochure that we did together, presenting the new comic scene of France and Francophone comic scene. Yes, did everybody take a look at this document already? Yes, right. So yes, the idea was to give you a kind of overview about the new French comic scene, because, well, Lyon Comics Festival for 15 years have invited many authors. I think it's around 200 authors every year, isn't it? So yes, yes. So the idea was to focus on a small selection of young authors who were, let's say, the rising star of the French comic scene, and we wanted to show the diversity of the French comic scene of today, because it's certainly its most important characteristic, I would say. It's very diverse. We have today the big chance of having this extraordinary diversity of authors, and well, you know, today, as I said, also in the video, the comic scene is tackling every kind of subject. It can be fiction, it can be non-fiction, it can be all kind of subjects. And the idea of this little document also is to show a selection of this diversity. So well, I don't know if you wanted to comment or to ask some questions. Excuse me, this is my cat coming here. Yes, I don't know if you wanted to say something about some of the authors, or to ask questions, or maybe I could goodbye. Yes, make a few comments myself. So just let me know how you want the discussion to be held.
Maybe we can start on these three different subjects: the comics in the city part, then the international, then the editorial landscapes, and just have like a chat about that and see what are your reactions were to these topics. If we start with maybe the comics in the city thing, are there examples in your own cities of comics and comic art and comic artists actually getting into museums or places like that? I'd be curious to know.
Well, maybe I could start. Yeah, so we are having in Łódź the biggest festival in Poland. Probably everyone knows now, and well, they are opening now a new center for narrative art. So it will be open next year, and they already have several exhibitions. Just like they have a big hall, big room for that was formed for machines in the 19th century. So it's a very high, very big, very nice space. And they had a very nice exhibition about posted a link on the Slack group about DC Comics and Marvel from the Musée des Arts Ludiques in Paris. So the whole collection from them. So that was the one example of a big exhibition about comics. And one of the only point where you can, or one of the only bookshops where you can buy comics in town. I mean, more than Asterix and the few standards in Poland is in the Museum of Modern Art. So that's a little shelf, but you see by the choice that it's very actual choice of titles. That's not just someone who has who has interest for it is just taking care of it. Otherwise, there are a lot of murals, but not directly with comic authors. Just sometimes it looks like it could be an option, but well, that's more or less the first thing that I would mention. Maybe I have some more ideas, but someone else can talk. So. No one.
Sure, I could say something, but not that big. Hello?
Yeah.
Would you? No. Okay. I think I'll talk a little later. I don't have the directly related to what you're saying, but in relation to museums, comics and museums.
Go ahead.
Sure. Well, first of all, hi Mathieu. It's so good to see you. Listen, as you know, with the for us, of course, comics in their world is much more limited, and those that are for adults didn't really show up till late or mid 2000s, more present. Before that, it was the 80s that had a little bit. So our comic scene is very, very vibrant today, but what is in the mental, landscape of people is still a little bit of comics for children, etc. But still, in that sense, we have had the last year at the Museum of Contemporary Art, which is a private institution. We don't have a local public museum for art, included the work of a comics artist in the exhibition of their Salon d'Automne, and it was really entirely on there. So they're very more able to consider this as part of contemporary art scene. Not only, we also have, thanks to the Samandal young groups who have been invited to Lyon, they have the Coissard dessiné, which is I think very much inspired by your so they have concert music, live concerts that has drawing that is being projected, and it's bringing in huge crowds, especially of course more underground young artists, but it is very, very in demand and very exciting. So I think this whole idea of bringing in comics to other disciplines, not to validate it, absolutely, but more to bring in another conversation is very interesting. And I think it brings, like you said, people who are not in or don't think they're into comics to reconsider what this medium and platform can offer. So I was very, very inspired. Thank you by your video. There are so many nice ideas that we can work on to, again, as I insist, not to validate comics, because that is an art and we are well aware of that. But again, to more bring in a different conversation and collaborations that bring in a wider audience as well. So thank you really so much. It was a really nice video.
Thanks a lot. Anyone else would like to elaborate on?
I could add from my earlier experience in Germany as well, because I've worked a lot with a group of comic artists called Pure Fruit. They are based in Kiel, in the north of Hamburg, and they've developed a lot of projects in order to make the comic scene alive. So there was a whole row of comic battles with 6 to 8 artists just drawing like that, and it was very just made a funny way, just that everyone had costumes and was just playing a character, and we had to in-scene the character during the comic battles. So there were always very funny things in that. It was very the beginning were really full of promises. And I think they didn't have, well, they started to have children and so on, so they didn't have that much time to develop the project. There was definitely a big potential in it, just to, not to make just one-shot comic battle, but to have really, almost to tell a story with these characters, a little bit like beyond their normal life, just to bring them on stage. That's very different efforts. Actually, I think that the most we had was 300 persons for a comic battle, which is just crazy. And we also had a museum in the north of Germany who ordered to make a comic battle in their place. So that was a very great, very nice experience as well, like nice recognition for this kind of projects. And I know they had a lot of connections after I've left. Then they had a lot of connections with the creative economy scene. So that was a very interesting connection as well. So they were really implied in development of new ideas for business. So that's.
I think that's one of the things. It's when you start experimenting these kind of things. It could never stop, because I think the first thing we did, like maybe 12 years ago, was a battle, as you were mentioning. So it's paper boards, standing up, and people fighting with drawings. But if you start to get comedians and directors of theater, of cinema involved in that, they will make it more and more square, less and less amateur, as we were doing, and everybody doing it first. And you see rapidly the need for a comedian actually hosting the show.
Yeah, definitely, moderator.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes a whole difference. And after a while, I've seen, we've been working with a few of comedy groups that are doing stand-up comedies and all that. And the more you get into that, and the more it gets to be the actual production of a live show, which happens to involve comics. And there's no limit to what you can do. Last year we had a great concert dessiné with, I'm not sure many of you are familiar with this, but Pénélope Bagieux, that you may know, did a concert with a band called Brigitte, which is quite big in France. And we had, I think, 1,000 people in the room, and it was a really beautiful concert. And you can see she developed one drawing, for each of the songs that were played on stage. And so it was not just illustration, it was participating in the show. And it can be that, but it can also be, we had a few adaptations in theaters of previously existing comic books. So you can take it both ways, and there's no limit really to what you can do with that.
Well, now through the crisis and the virus, it was rather the question how to adapt that to internet, because actually it should be possible to make it on Zoom, for instance, to have a comic battle. It's just on the technical way, you have to try it once, or and to find the people to organize it. But it's would be very interesting to develop that, because in this way you have really no not even the geographical limits to that, and you can invite people from Japan and from Argentina and South Africa, and they're all coming just under the same way. And through the fact that you have people from different countries, it's getting and for a live performance, it's getting really just probably very attractive for the audience as well.
And it's funny you talk about that, because as you know, we've changed our festival, which is not happening, into a non-festival that is happening digitally. And tomorrow at 5:30 French time, we have a battle exactly like what you described. And it's 2 artists from Quebec and 2 artists from France. It's Arthur Depince, Claire Fauvel from France. And in Quebec, it's Pascal Colpron and Alex A, who's quite famous actually in Quebec. And so they are going to do a battle like exactly what you described. So I hope you guys will have time to be there, but try and give it a look, because we've been working a lot on that.
I'd love to.
I know our time is kind of limited, so maybe we could change to the international subject and see if, I mean, we are not going to elaborate now on projects that we could do together, but I just wanted to state again, and maybe Belinda can follow up on this, but our will to collaborate with other countries and other comics regions throughout the world. Belinda, do you want to say a word about that?
Yeah, I was just writing in the chat to tell you that I will post the link tomorrow for the battle that we have online, and also for all the program that we are doing for our non-festival. So you'll be able to watch if you are available. And yeah, about the international project, as you saw on the video, it's really wide, because sometimes it's just projects that we used to do with French artists here in Lyon. And so it's quite simple just to ask other festivals around the world. And the more contact we have, as Mathieu said, the more it's possible to do things together. And so this project that we used to do with French artists become international, just because we have the right contact, and also the possibility to develop this kind of project. And generally it goes on both sides. It's not just in foreign artists coming to France doing stuff, but it's also on the other side. We send artists abroad, and we like the artists to meet as well. So it's not only artists that are sent in another country with no link whatsoever with anything. Generally they go to the festival which can happen in the country. They participate in debates and so on, and they most of all have contact with local artists. And that's what we did with the books, for example, that we published, that were really drawing conversation between the artists. It's not just that they draw by themselves in their rooms. They really met and they created stuff together. And it's the same with all the performance we can have, as the concert that we did, for example, at the LICAF in England, and then in Lyon last year with Charlie Adlard and the French musician. They met before. They really developed the thing together, and so they could play it in United States, in England, in France, and it's really a mixed, really a creation that's not just 2 artists put on stage and we don't know what happened, but it's we build the project and we follow everyone, and generally artists are really happy because they meet new artists around the world. They take part in new kind of projects that is more unusual than just doing books as they are used to do. and then it creates also new opportunities for them because they meet new professionals at festival. They can do their performance or these new creation in other festivals. So it's quite interesting for them as well as for us, because that's our identity, to create stuff every year with different partners. So if any of you have ideas that they wish to develop, or we are really there, just send an email or just share your ideas, and maybe we can just help you to organize stuff or really work on project together if it's possible. So to you then.
Maybe we can give the mic to Daniel, who wanted to share his experience in Valencia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the video. It was really inspiring and interesting. There are a lot of ideas, and I saw myself very reflected in the way you are focusing your festival, because we try to be in the cultural life of the city, and to make comic during some time reachable for the people in Valencia, in Spain. The situation in Spain has, I will make a short story about the situation in Spain. It has changed dramatically. It is now common that comics is in the museums. We are organizing regularly in the university meetings and talks and seminars about topics related to comics, not only about authors or books, but also related to, I don't know, comic books as an educational tool and this kind of things. And well, the visibility of comics, and it is now in Spain, it has increased a lot. And we are very present in the academical life. There is Cátedra. Cátedra is a department in the University of Valencia. Now we are having also a master degree in the university about comic as an educational tool. And well, we are very active in Valencia, trying to be present in all the institutions, not only in the library, in the comic shops, in the bookshops, and also in our event, but also during the whole year in different places in the city. And we are also very happy to, as I told us the first day, I would like to establish all the cooperations that are possible. And we believe in cooperation more than in not fighting, but competition, exactly. Thank you. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much. And it was really a very interesting meeting all these days. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to elaborate or throw ideas or anything on the international subject? Well, yeah, Gregory?
In fact, it's not elaborate or any ideas, but during the video you talk about Japan 2021, and I would be happy to know more about it.
Of course, you're there. Well, it's really the embryo of a project, but I'll explain things that you already know, but for everybody to be aware, there's the French Institute globally does, I don't know how you call it in English, but cultural seasons, saison croisée. And some of you may have seen things before, because it was France, Korea, then France, Mexico. We were on the Africa team in 2020, but it's been postponed. And in 21, normally there should be a France in Japan season. And so I've been in Japan a few months ago in February, luckily just before confinement prevented me to do so. And so the idea was to see how we could maybe try and develop a project to make sure that this season would imply and involve comics, because obviously Japan has a huge comics culture, even if it's called manga. And I had never been to Japan before, so we did what we usually do when we want to work with a country, which I was explaining to Joanna on the chat, is you have to go there at some point, because it's not enough to send emails and see people over the internet. And so I've been there, and I've worked with the people at the book office in Tokyo, and they introduced me to a lot of Japanese publishers of French comics. I've met a few artists as well, and seen a bit of what Tokyo and Japan was like. And now we are elaborating on a project that would maybe offer the possibility of an exhibition going to Japan from France, something that we would be producing. And also, because I think it's important, I would very much like to have a format that would be a bit more like what we discussed on the video, that would involve artists from Japan and from France meeting all together, and maybe having some live concerts with drawing and that kind of stuff. I mean, not having only an exhibition, which is quite still, but also having something very live and alive. But at the moment, it's something that we are drafting with the French Institute, so I can't say it's going to happen. That's why you may have not known so far.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, Joris?
On your way to Japan, if you think of having a stopover in Singapore, we'll have the Country Focus France in the Singapore Writers Festival in October and November 2021. So maybe as Japan and Singapore are not that far. I know that Taiwan also has a literary festival at the same period of time in the fall of that. So we might also find ways to collaborate on a regional scale, including Taiwan and Singapore.
Yeah,
so you would like to have us as well.
Sure. Agreed.
Thank you.
But yes, especially since, as Belinda was a bit explaining, one thing that is very important for us, and I think it's very important for the French Institute as well, and that's why we've been working a lot with the French Institute, is that whatever we do abroad, it's always in the idea of collaborating. On the artist level, because we like to have French artists working with their counterparts in any country we go to, on the festival organizers level as well. And I think it's when you have like two different cultures of comics that meet, that you can have really productive and artistic things that happen. And this is what we are trying to do at the moment in Beirut with this initiative we are having in October. And so that's one thing I wanted to say, is that when we do that, we try to make these kind of connections. And about the Singapore idea, for sure we'll talk about it even after this focus, because there's many different ways in which we can do things. Because when you think of it, it's not necessarily that expensive to have comic art traveling, because there's many shapes and many ways you can do it. And I didn't know, to be honest, the French focus at the book fair, but let's clearly stay in touch about that. Anyone else? Joanna, in Portugal, you had an idea in mind when you were asking about how we do these things?
Hi. Not exactly an idea, but I would like to work with friends, and we're gonna have our saison croisée that has been postponed too. First, we heard that maybe it could be at the same time at Japan, but we don't know exactly the new dates. But I would be very glad to work with you and to maybe have a project to dialogue with friends in Portugal. We don't, our comic authors are not very comics are not very developed in Portugal, not as much as in France or other countries, but there is a lot of work in illustration, comics too, but it's not very important in terms of number of comics. When I started working in France, I was completely surprised to see how important was comics in France, and how people, there was lots of comics about literature, about sociology, history, politics. Here in Portugal, it's not developed as that, but I think it would be great to have a project to work together, and maybe before that too. But Saison Croisée, it would be a good start, or to start working together. I don't know if in Festival de Lyon, have you invited Portuguese authors? Maybe c'est Cédric ou Cyril Pedrosa? Je perds son prénom.
Pedrosa?
Oui.
Cyril Pedrosa.
You have maybe invited him? But
yes, we have, but I think he's French, from Portuguese descent.
Yeah.
But and he's very good. But yeah, it's a good idea, and it now kind of becomes not an habit, but nearly, that we work with the Saison Croisée. So we were very involved in the Frankfurt in French initiative, because I was working on that as a comic artistic advisor. And after that, we've been working with the Africa 2020 season that has been postponed. And so there's been a lot of that. And with Portugal, the good thing is that we already have a few connections, because we've been working a little bit with the Amadora Festival, which is near Lisbon. Very good festival, very impressive artists there. And a few years ago, we tried with them and the Luch Festival that Luca knows very well, to obtain a Europe Creative Grant, but we didn't succeed at the time. And funny enough, we tried again this year, but with different partners, and we just had the answer a few days ago that our Europe Creative project has been validated by the European Commission, which is a very good thing, obviously. And just to say that we've been working a lot with Amadora, which is a very good festival. So we already have a contact there, which is a big part of it, because there's a natural partner in a way, if I can say so. So regarding this cultural season, we could definitely talk about it. I had been to the French Institute in Lisbon a few years ago, just to see how it was. And so yes, definitely.
You have been there for 3 years ago? Okay.
In Amadora, I think it was 3 years ago, more or less, yes.
Because we changed we had a very big French institute, and now we have a smaller one. Donc,
I think I've seen the big one.
Thank you. There's also another festival, the Beja Festival in the south of Portugal, in interior. I don't know if you're in touch with them too.
No.
Okay.
But I'd be curious to see how it looks like.
I can send you the link.
Sure. But yes, same thing. Let's stay in touch and talk about it. And I think because the good thing is the French Institute is planning these cultural seasons for, years in advance. And I think there's one in Argentina that is on the scope too. But I'm not sure. Was it Alessandro from Buenos Aires who was there the other day? But I'm not sure he's here today.
No, he's not here. But I can tell you the Argentinian season is in mind of people. Let's say it's not official, but it will probably happen.
Okay, so maybe we'll try to put a word to Alessandro, because as I was saying, we've been working in the past for 2 years in a row with Argentina when we started this international project. So same thing, we have a lot of connections there. So it will be interesting to keep an eye on that as well.
I had a question, Mathieu. Yesterday, when we spoke with Anne-Hélène Haug from the museum in Angoulême, there were this question of the circulation of the exhibitions, and mostly in Europe, and let's say the underlying question was, is there any kind of network in between festivals in Europe, or is that a question you are asking yourself, given that you have many collaboration now? Can you imagine like a permanent network starting in Europe?
Of comics festival?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, there is kind of an unofficial network of comics festival, because I mean, we've been working with Quebec since 2011, and because we go to Quebec, and because we are now working with the Lakes Festival with Richard and Julie Tate since like 3 years ago, they met probably in Lyon, I suppose. Then Julie went to the Quebec Festival. I introduced the director of the Quebec Festival to our friends at the Josso School in Barcelona. And I mean, so there is definitely an unofficial network, and some of these festivals, I mean, all of the festivals I mentioned are really willing and eager to collaborate on the international level. So natural connections are kind of working. And what was your question about the exhibitions?
No, I think that was not mine. I'm not a professional, but I think one of the question was, can exhibition can circulate more, and how can we make it easier to circulate? Okay. And there were kind of a European perspective on it.
Yes. The thing is, we have a catalog of live shows and exhibitions that we produced and designed so they can travel quite easily. Some are very, very simple exhibitions, I mean, in terms of format, and they stand on roll-ups, you know, these things that you that are self auto-portés, stand by themselves, as you can imagine. And we have more ambitious productions as well. But we've been having these exhibitions traveling a lot over the past few years. For example, some of you might know, I know Miriam does in Berlin, the Heroine exhibition. In a nutshell, it's an exhibition that was created a few years ago, which was talking about the underrepresentation of women in comic heroes, because it's always been the case in the past, in France at least. And so this exhibition, it was commissioning artists to make an illustration focusing on that theme. And so we had many artists ending up actually creating an illustration that was turning very famous figures of comic art, of the French culture of comic arts, into their female equivalents. And behind the anecdotic side of it, it triggered some interesting reflections. And then we had interviews with the artists about how, why, and we had researchers doing elaborate research on those themes, and all that made an exhibition that has been traveling a lot. So it's been to the Lakes Festival. And what we've been doing, again, in that will to have artists collaborate more than just take our French contents and put them somewhere abroad, which has not much meaning, is whenever this exhibition has traveled, we commissioned new works from local artists doing a caricature of their own comic culture. So when we did that in the Frankfurt Book Fair with Miriam, we had, I think, 2 German artists who used the very famous in Germany comic called Father and Son. Is that it, Miriam? And t'as ton micro coupé.
Ja, Vater und Sohn auf Deutsch. Also Father and Son.
Okay.
Now the name I forget, but probably Augusto could tell, which is also translated into French by Varum. And well, the exhibition was shown in many French institutes in Germany. It had really a long tour, but we had, for the occasion, we translated the text into German also, because as it is always a kind of a pedagogical exhibition, it makes sense to have it in your own language. Otherwise, you would only speak to French people living in your country, which is always
the
PowerPoint. But it worked very well. We had many, I don't know in how many institutes it was shown, but at least 6 or 7. And there would probably be more interest for that kind of formats. Yeah.
And so this exhibition has been presented as well in Los Angeles last year. And so we had American artists creating work in the same way. I think we did it in Canada with Julie Rochelot, Guy Delisle creating, same again, a part of the exhibition, respecting its theme, but done with their way. And again, this is a way of reaching the local public and audience, because it's not French things going to French institutes for French people living there, as Myriam was saying. It's a French idea maybe that is being shared and produced jointly to be presented in another country. So I think it's also kind of much more respectful of the local creativity and audience. And so to answer your question, Roma, so we have another exhibition like that, which was produced last year, that is being translated at the moment, and that will present in Beirut, and we are considering to translate it in Arabic, because again, there's a question of the content, but the question of the language also. And I think it's it's a way we kind of do it, and it works, because you're not just sending something, you are creating something new with the people in the country where you go. And it's something that we've developed a lot with our partners, and this informal network, as I was saying, because it's been to Quebec, which is our oldest partner, and it's been to the Lakes, which is our more recent, maybe important partner. So that's how it works. And to come back to this idea of a comics festival network, the good thing is, generally speaking, what happens is we meet in festivals. And because festivals, unfortunately, you have not seen ours this year, but you will next year, are designed to be a big party, to be honest. People just drink and have fun and see things, and we always end up having a beer and saying, we should do that, oh, we could do that, and there it goes, and we just do things. Is that right, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think Mathieu describes a really well-developed way of presenting exhibitions and looking for a new life for them, a new way of presenting them that's relevant to each location. But I do think there's maybe, for some of us who aren't perhaps that far down the way, there's perhaps a way of coming up with a way of sharing exhibitions, proposing tours, offering exhibitions that are ready-made and that could have a new life in new locations. And I think I've already been in an email conversation with Danielle about that, and I think maybe there is merit in that in some way, to explore how we could tour exhibitions to different venues across internationally.
Sure. I think on our side, Belinda will post our catalog that you already know, Richard, of shows and exhibitions, because the thing is also, exhibitions are one thing and one way of showcasing comics, but I can talk a little bit, maybe, Richard, about our joint collaboration with the US last year, but I met Julie Tate, who's the Lakes Festival director, I think 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, and she came 6 months later in our festival, and we were just chatting over a drink again, and she actually asked me, oh, I have a project in the US, would you be interested in participating? So I was like, yeah, why not, where? And she said, Los Angeles. Okay, so I tried not to show too much enthusiasm, to not crazy, which I failed to do. And long story short, we had this creation of a festival in Los Angeles last year in May, so 1 year ago, that was like 1/3 US, 1/3 UK, 1/3 French, that we all managed together. And on the way, we developed a show which was really produced between the lakes and us. And the idea was we introduced Charlie Adlard. He's a very famous artist behind The Walking Dead that you may know, the comics that were there before the TV show. And so we introduced Charlie, who's from England and who is a regular at the Lakes Festival, to a musician, a composer that I know in Lyon called Julien Limon. And Julien has been composing film musics, among other things. And so they basically created together a live show with live drawing in the theme and universe of The Walking Dead. And this show has been presented a first time at the Los Angeles Festival that we had 1 year ago, then a second time at the Lyon Festival in a big concert venue. I think you see maybe a little bit of it on our video. And the third time was in Richard's Festival, the Lakes Festival in England. And it was really something with, you had like one French musician on scene and one British comic artist on scene. And it traveled in 3 different countries and was produced by 2 of them. And this is a perfect example of things you can do. And to be honest, it was not that, I mean, there was some production in terms of composing, making it work between the 2 of them because they didn't know each other before we introduced them. But apart from that, it's basically 2 plane tickets each time, a few fees. But I'm just saying it's not that complicated to have these formats traveling, to just say that there's exhibitions, but also formats like this. And
if I may add something to what you just said, Mathieu, that maybe you've seen the Eisner Award nominees for this year, the list of nominees, especially in the foreign book section, international material, that's what it's called. And you'll see this year that it's basically just French authors, and that these French authors were all invited to the Los Angeles Huntington Beach Festival. So there is a direct link also between this kind of of projects and the impact that it has for exporting French comic authors in the USA.
If maybe we could, if some of you have questions about, you've seen the video and the brochures that Sylvain has been designing with help from Belinda, maybe there are some questions or talks about that. It's mostly meant to give you ideas of people you may not have noticed so far, because it's not that easy to spot from abroad. But as I was answering to Joanna, when we, generally speaking, we are not looking for artists of a country. We are looking to see how the editorial landscape and the comic arts industry works in a specific country. So all of what Sylvain has been doing and elaborating for this focus group was really about trying to give you guys some hints like we look for when we go to a country to see who's doing what and how things work and all that. So we hope it's useful. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead, because we have luckily Sylvain with us.
Yeah, so, or if someone just want to say if he has some intention to publish or to invite some French authors in the next months, maybe, yes, you can share your intentions with us, your projects.
Hi, Hello, Sylvain. Thank you. I don't have intentions. I'm sorry, but I did have a question when I saw you first on Monday regarding, because you're in your wonderful PDF. I already commented, so I really think it's great and very high diversity and everything. Was at the end of the PDF of the document, you said if you're interested in translating, and I was saying, has Riyad Sattouf been translated to Arabic? And someone said we will look into it. Did anybody come up with the answer? Because I have not found anything in the Arab world yet, and I'm pretty connected. So
I checked. I think it's they have been trying to translate the first of it, and then it collapsed. The whole project collapsed.
Okay, we don't collapse. Excuse me. So would I be able to get any help in connecting? How does anybody have an idea where I should go to reestablish this suggestion?
Actually, the French Institute would be a good place, I think.
Okay,
I can try to find the right contact at the let's say the book office there.
Would you, Romain, would you suggest the French Institute here in Beirut or French Institute in Paris?
No, the French Institute in Beirut. That's their job, actually.
That would be Alexandre, Nina.
Sorry, excuse me.
We said it. Yeah, it's Alexandre, yeah.
Okay. I'm meeting Alexandre next week, Friday, so great. I'll talk to him about it. Thank you so much, Romain. I really appreciate it. I'm glad the project didn't work there, so I hope I'll make it work. Thank you so much.
I would add that would be highly symbolic if it was first translated in Lebanon.
I mean,
that would be great.
Yes, I think it's very much needed. I'll just say something about Joe Sacco's Footnotes on Gaza was translated, and it was translated into classical Arabic, which is difficult to read, very inaccessible, and very not comics. So, and Joe Sacco's language is informal. So, plus I made a complete comparison between the translated text and first of all, you cannot find it anywhere. Nobody buys it. It's not known, and this is, a really important document on how with established, interviews with people from the 1940s. So it's really important in the Arab history. But I found that the translation also added little sentences here and there that are typically Arabic propaganda. And I don't know if the publisher or anybody knows about that, because I really compared the text, so Joe Sacco would say women were killed in this incident, and so they would say elderly, children, women were killed under the nation of, and I was really, this is not. So anyway, yes, I hope that I would like to propose in such a translation would be something about the way the text is written and adapt. And I think Lebanon really, really has a good history of that. So I hope so. Thank you.
And it's funny, I just realized that talking about this informal virtual comics festival network, that the festival we will organize in Beirut with Lina, and I know Lina because the French Institute in Beirut told me that you suggested a few artists that would be interesting, such as Dave McKean and Joe Sacco. And so I can now tell you that I transferred this request to Julie Tate, who works with Richard Foster, who's also on the screen here. So if this isn't a comic festival network, what is it?
Perfect, and thank you, Mathieu. Of course, I know these are very, very, traditional names, and people say, "Oh my God," But seriously, we need that interest will bring in a crowd that is, unprecedented and very much needed to help this art form rise a little bit and have some kind of support. We have zero support. If we don't have this one donor who tends to try to, help people publish, the artists, they, starve for maybe 2 years to be able to do something. So this is why a little bit of media exposure is really needed. So in that sense, I just want people to understand that we of course look for a real diversity of artists and not just the stars.
Totally understand and agree, and I think it's important, and that's because I'm basically trying to involve the Lakes Festival, Richard and Julie, into the initiative that we have in Lebanon, and they have these connections with the artist you mentioned a few days ago. And I think it's interesting because this festival we are trying to do will be in 3 languages, English, French, and Arabic, again, to be in connection with the country. And so that makes sense, I guess, for the Lakes Festival to then join in, you know, along with you guys at the AUB and all that. But it was just to explain a little bit of this connection. And don't worry, Richard is a little bit like the godfather, you know, in his country. So there will be the head of the horse in someone's bed at some point, and they will come to our festival.
Well, hello, Richard, and hello, of course, everybody else. I must say that Sako was here. I interviewed him. He was in Beirut in 2014. He loves coming here. It's a matter of his commitments. But I do say that other artists tend to be a little bit weary of coming to the Middle East. So we're a little bit scary and understood, but we provide beautiful Mediterranean Sea, blue skies,
good food,
and lots of good parties.
Sold.
I'll take care of you, Richard.
I've never been called the godfather of comics before. That I'm going to take that away. That's a game for the week.
Good, good.
Roman, do we have time? Or
I just had a call from Nicolas Diez, who is worried about the next session.
Okay.
So that would be my answer.
Okay. Well, it's been unfortunate we couldn't meet physically, but I think this whole Slack digital thing worked way better than I expected, actually. And at least we kind of know a little bit of each other, and we can stay in touch and hopefully finally meet in 21, if not in one or the other festival before.
Well, so thank you very much, Mathieu and Belinda and Sylvain. I say goodbye to the people from the Focus. That was really nice to meet you all. And we'll have a last meeting with the French Cultural Network abroad in something like 15 minutes.
Okay, so let's stay in touch. We'll keep talking on Slack.
Yes. Is this the last meeting we have as a group in general?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank everyone so much for having me. Seriously, it was really, like you said, unexpectedly much more comfortable than I expected. We've been all on Zoom for the past 4 or 5 months, and everyone has been so welcoming and interesting. And Romain, you have been fantastic moderating all these different panels, so thank you so much.
Thanks very much. But we have to thank really Lyon BD and the Cité Internationale de la Bande Dessinée and l'Image for the content, because they have been like giving all the content.
Without a doubt, Mathieu, Lyon BD, and of course La Cité. But those are often thanked, but you tend to be the person who's always there, but no, no direct thank you.
Thank you, Lina. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye, Godfather.
It's registered.